Oh, and we also have this supplementally some extra guide to sockets at this link. And then the docs link is documentation for our socket manager code, which let me pull up our code and we can walk through that file real quick. Okay. So if we go over here, actually, wait, I'll get through the slides first. So, just to demo what we're building today, I'm gonna go over to weblab.is/example. Check out the chat section, and you should be able to like send messages, and then submit. And then if someone else posts a message, or if someone else gets online, I think Skippy just got online, it'll populate there. Okay, so we're going to start off with git reset hard, and then we're gonna check out W7 starter. And then let me just double check. Okay, my server is still running and my run dev is still running. But if you close your computer, it might not be running, so start that over again. And then let's talk about so we have two files that we added, the client socket.js. This basically just tells us like to import sockets and then like turn on the socket when we can connect to our server. And then server socket has a little bit more functionality. There is where's the slide with the, okay, we'll encounter the slide later, but one of the slides also has like a review of what all these functions do. You can look at them for now. We'll talk about them when we need to talk about them. Okay, so just to get some practical experience writing socket code, our step 0.1 and 0.2 will be to write like a server emit. So we're going to be, I think this is an API. Yeah, so this is in post message. So when someone posts a message, we want to emit to all clients the message that was just received. Let me get out of insert mode. How do I get? Okay. And to do that, we're going to need to do socket manager.getIO, which is getting everybody's sockets, and then .emit. The event will be messages, and we'll be emitting message. So come code with me as I do just that. So on the message channel, we'll emit the message that we just received and formatted nicely. And then on the client side, we're going to, so what we want is when I open the Chatbook page, I want to turn on my socket and start listening for messages. So I'm going to put that in a use effect because we want this to happen when we log on. And so we'll turn socket.on, message, and then the second parameter is what we're going to do when we receive a message. And we have the handy add message function. Okay, any questions on 0.1, 0.2? Okay, and then, so just recap of what's happening. When I send a message, I'm gonna call the post API message. So that's calling that API request. And then upon receiving that message, the socket is going to broadcast to everybody the message. Okay, and then finally for step 0.3, whenever we turn on a socket, we need to turn off the socket when we leave the page, or else, as Skippy said, like we'll keep getting messages that like is a waste of resources. So if you remember from all the way back to the React lifecycle and hooks lecture, useEffect also can return something, and the return, whatever's inside the return, some callback function, it runs when the component dismounts, as in when I stop rendering the component. So I'm gonna type that in right here. And then, so what we need is we need to turn off our socket, and the arguments of socket.off would be exactly what is in your socket.on, so it knows which socket to turn off. Okay, any questions on this? Give you guys a second to process this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're trying to understand what's happening here. So basically what's happening in add message is that, so set active chat, remember, is our setter for the active chat state, and this is a callback function. So we're going to, I see, so whoever was the previous active chat, we're going to keep the same recipient but concatenate the new message. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Why we're turning off the socket? Yeah, it's mostly like a resource conservation thing. Like when I navigate off the page, because you can think of staying on a socket as like opening a phone line, and it just keeps the phone line open, and so it's like, there's like extra information that you're sending, and it'll be more efficient if we close the phone when we are no longer listening for messages. That's essentially what it is. So yeah, make sure whenever you guys are doing sockets to always have this socket off. It also helps with, later on we'll have a list of active users, and when you navigate off the page, we want to make sure that you're not an active user, and so that helps us, like, when we call socket.off, we also like dismount you from this list of active users, so it'll be helpful for that as well. Okay. Sliding into DMs, let's start with step 1. So get reset hard, and then check out W7 step 1. Okay, so what we're going to do in steps 1 and 2 is modifying the front end to show the DMs. So component tree, we'll be doing this part. We're going to be rendering chat lists and single user component. So this will mostly, I think this step will just be React code. So we can walk through it I think I will live code at least step 1 because it's really just React code. But just as a reference, that's what we were talking about earlier today. Okay, so step 1.1 is building the single user button. So let's look for that. Okay, so right now, this is our skeleton code for single user. What we want to render is, if we note here, what we want to render is the name of this user. And as a prompt, we see that single user takes in a user object. So we want to render their name. So between the two divs, I'm going to render props.user.name. And then we also need to update the onClick function to change the user onClick. As in, when I click on the user, I'm setting the active chat, like person I'm talking to that user. So to do that, we've passed down the setActiveUser function, so we can just call setActiveUser. Remember to do props.setActiveUser, and then you can set it to props.user. Okay, questions on step 1? Okay, cool. Yeah, let me know if you all need more time to copy down this. Okay, so that's step 1.1. 1.2, now we're going to build the list of users. So this is in chat list, and we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. We just take the list of users, which is this user object array, and then we're just going to map it to single user elements. Oh, and it's also telling me I should probably render this open chats thing at the top. props.users gives me the list of users, and then I'm going to map each user and their item, like their index, to a single user item, and then a single user takes in many props. Let us look at what props it takes in. So let me open this on the side. Okay, so single user takes in, I need to pass down set active user. And then we can get set active user is passed down to chat list as a prop. So props.set active user. Next, there's the user object, which will be this user, like the individual user that we pass like in this map. And then finally, we have active, which is a Boolean that says like whether or not we, the user here, is the active user. Now, note we have active, which is like a user object. So in chat list, active is who is the active user, and then in single user, it's am I the active user? I hope that was helpful. But that just amounts to comparing if props.active is equal to the user. Okay, so that's step 1.2. Do we have any questions? And I'll give you guys a moment to copy that down. Okay, so for steps 1.3 and 1.4, I'm going to get rid of this. So this will be in Chatbook. We keep talking about this active users thing, but we need to define it. So we need a state that keeps track of the list of all people who are active. And right now it'll be initialized to the empty array. And then, and then we need to define, so I'll get to step 1.4 when I get to step 1.4. But for this, it's just set active users, comma, set active users is the empty array. Actually, should I put all chat? I think it's fine if I don't do all chat just yet. Okay. Makes sense? Yeah. It's just one line. Hopefully people were able to copy that. And then now we're going to add a callback function called setActiveUser. So it just we're going to get a user as a parameter, and we're just going to, for now we're just going to print the user's name. Later on, what we're going to do is change this side to display the messages from when we open that. So define const setActiveUser. So we take in a user, and for now we'll just console.log setting active user to the user. Since it's a user object, we'll need user.name. Okay, and then that's it. Okay, I thought we were going to pass it down, but I think we're going to pass it down in step 2. Okay, so if you caught all of that, we can now get reset hard and check out the next step. Okay, so step 2 is, oh no, sorry guys, I forgot to change the numbering. It used to be step 3. But step 2 is now adding the chat list component into this. So right now what we have rendering is, if we go over to our actual chat book, what we have rendering is just the chat, right? But now we're going to render a chat list component. And then I'm going to actually give you guys a minute or two. Just take a look at what props chat list takes and then pass down the appropriate props. So let me open this to the other side. So you'll need to pass down these props and then think about where you could get these props from. hopefully you've had the time to do that. Let's come together and do that real quick. So first thing I need to pass down is users. And that'll be, I think it's one of the, yeah, it'll be the active users. Let me double check, yeah. Where is it? The active users state that we just created. The next one is active, which is, so right now we see that we have this active chat state. So our active user will be whoever we're actively chatting with. So it'll be the recipient of the active chat state. Active chat.recipient. Next, we need to put in the user ID. That we can just pass in. It's either consumed here or passed in as a prop. Oh, that's odd. Let props use Outlook context, yeah. So this props is not passed in directly into Chatbook, but we get it from our outlet, our context. Okay, and then finally, we have the setActiveUser function, which is just the setActiveUser function that we just defined up in the previous step. Julios, any question on this? All right. Okay, so now let's look. We have the open chats thing, but our DMs are very much empty. So that's what we're going to implement in the next step. But first, I need to yap a little bit more. We can't implement DMs naively. So first of all, just going back to what sockets does, when let's say I want to send a message to Skippy with help because Lucas has been sorely abusing us weblab workers, and I don't want Lucas to know. So I will post this, and I'll say like, oh, can you send it to Skippy, please? And then what my server is going to do is it's going to get I/O. It's going to get all the sockets connected to us, and then it's going to emit help. And now Lucas knows that I'm planning a revolution, and I don't want that to happen. So yeah, this get I/O thing gets all connected sockets. We just sent our DMs to everyone. So the problem is that IO.emit alone is public to all sockets. We send it to every socket. If we want to emit to a particular client socket, we need to get that socket like object and then emit to that socket. So maybe one idea we have is that the DM sender gives the server the DM recipient's user ID, and then the server can somehow identify the DM recipient socket. But the problem is we don't know whose socket is who. I guess I don't have the slide right here, but basically the point is like the socket ID is generated by socket.io, and then the user ID is generated by like Google or MongoDB, right? And there's no, like these two values aren't the same values, and so we don't know which socket belongs to which user. And so how we're going to fix it is have the server maintain a map from user ID to socket and socket ID to user. So every time I'm telling the server, like, hey, I want to send a message to Skippy, the server is going to look up this map and say, okay, Skippy's ID maps to this socket, and so I'm going to send it to this socket. On the other hand, if I receive a message from my socket, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this socket ID, but I don't know which user ID it corresponds to, the server can take the socket ID and map it to the corresponding user. So right now, we're only going to use the first message for just showing who's who, but later on, we're going to use the second mapping. But yeah, finally, just remember, the user is not equal to the user ID, and the socket is not equal to socket ID. Because like the user is like a JSON object, the user ID is what we use to identify the user. Same thing with socket. A socket's like an object that has functions, and the socket ID is just a string that helps us identify the socket. Okay, any questions on what we're gonna do? Cool, so that's what our next step is. Concretely, when Skippy logs on, you know, like we did the whole login stuff, but when we log on, what we want to do is, or when Skippy logs on, she connects to one of the sockets, right? And then the sockets send back to Skippy some information about itself. And on the server side, the server sees that a socket has been connected, but we don't know that it's Skippy's socket. So in order to do that, we're going to send an API request. So once Skippy connects to the socket, and the socket says, hi, you've connected to me, this is your information, Skippy's gonna send that information over to the server, saying, hi, I'm Skippy, and my socket is like the socket1 object here. And not only that, the server can get information about Skippy through like rec.user after she has logged in and everything. And then what the socket's gonna do is the socket manager is going to call this add user function, which let me show you right here. It is in server socket.js. So basically add user is like, I take in a user object and a socket, and I just update the two maps, right? This first thing is just checking if the user's already connected, and if they are, and the new socket ID is not the same, then I will disconnect the old socket and then like add in the new socket. So basically just the user ID will map to the socket that I get, and then vice versa. And so now in the future, whenever I want to talk to Skippy, I can just like push it through this map. So the next time I need to send a DM to Skippy, the socket manager will call the get socket from user ID function to get Skippy socket and send a message to Skippy. And so the code will look like this, right? Socket manager.get socket from user ID. I put in Skippy's ID. This front thing, this is a socket object, and the socket objects have this emit function. Questions? Okay, let's see that in practice. So everybody get reset hard and check out step 3. Okay, so our step 1 is just creating this API slash init socket request. So let me find it for y'all. So so this is the function that happens right after we log in. What we want to do is after we log in, we're going to make a post call to /API/init socket. And we're going to pass in, I believe we can pass in the information like socket.id. So I'll write it here, but I'll write it here. You can get the socket in ID with socket.id. So that's the front end, and then 3.2 is on the back end, which I'll do it on this side. So this, once we call this init socket route, we're gonna call the socket manager.addUser function, and remember that takes in the user and the socket ID. So you can get the user information with rec.user, and you can get the socket object from this, socket manager.getSocket from socket ID. So like, for the sake of because you don't want to send in like too many things, you're going to be sending the socket ID over to this API, to the backend. And then you can get the socket from the socket ID with this. All right, I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that. And as always, weblab.is/q for the Q, weblab.is/questions for questions. is the next one? Yeah. This is the, if you are on the slides, the next slide gives you like the input outputs for what these functions are, if that's helpful. You can also go to weblab slash, I believe it's socket docs for the documentation for each of these functions. Okay, does anyone need extra time? Raise your hand. Okay, I will start coding this up. So starting with step 3.1, we're going to make a post call to /API/socket. So I'm going to post /API/init socket. And what I'm going to send over in my post request is just my socket ID. You can, oh no. I think you can see it in the docs right here. Yeah, so we're just giving socket ID. So socket ID is socket.id. So this socket object is our client socket, and then we can get its ID with this. Okay, so that's it for the front end. And then for the back end, make this bigger, or maybe I will bring this over here. What we're going to do is once someone talks to init socket and the user object exists, we're going to call socket manager.addUser. And then if we look at the docs, or weblab.is/socket docs, add user is here. So it takes a user object and a socket object. So we can get the user object with rec.user, and then to get the socket object, I will call, there should be a get socket from socket ID function. Yeah, so we're gonna call socket manager dot get socket from socket ID, and then we're gonna pass in my rec dot body dot socket ID. Okay, any questions on these two parts? All right, let's move on. Okay, slideshow, move on. Oh, I hate the little pop-up that shows up for Zoom. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna get reset hard and check out the next step. So now that we are maintaining, so like whenever people log on, we're adding them to our list of active users. What we want to do next is to display all these active users. So this is what we coded up. And so when a function, like our client logs onto our Chatbook, we want to call a GET request to get all the active users. Okay, and that's what step 4 is. So I think this is just the back end for now. So we want to send back an object with the field active. Yeah, you will look for the list of all active users. And I think you'll send back something of the form res.send, like active users, and then you want to get the active users in some way. And the way you do that is if we open, do I have serversocket.js? If I open serversocket.js on the side, I'll note that we have this get all connected users function. So we're going to just type in socket manager dot get all connected users. This just sends over the list that we maintain, or the array that we maintain. And then wait, let me try to remember, do we call this in the front end? I think we haven't written the front end yet. But when we write the front end, we will take the information in this way. Okay, questions on this step? Cool. All right, and then now on the front end, we're going to render all active users currently on Chatbook. So again, reset hard and check out the next step. So we're checking out step 5. So we are going to be working in Chatbook, I believe. Let me just double check. Yeah, Chatbook. Move this over here. We can move the API over to the other side. So upon load, I want to call this endpoint that I just created. And then, well, first of all, we need to check if the user is logged in. But we want to load the list of all active users by just like setting the active users to this active user state that we defined earlier. On top of that, don't forget all chat, because all chat isn't like one of the users, but we still need to render all chat. So make sure you remember all chat. Okay, I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to do that. does anyone need more time? Would like more time? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm gonna just start coding this one. So we're going to call the get request that we just defined. So get /API/active users. And then it's going to give us users. And we're gonna map that to, well, we're just gonna set active users to the users, but not just the users. We need to concatenate all chat. So we add I believe all chat is defined. Yeah, all chat is defined as a user. And then I like to use the unpacking operator. This just unpacks all the elements here. And it does the same thing as concatenating. And then furthermore, we need to check if, we can only load the active users if the user is not logged in. So in here, I'll do props.user ID. We just check if the user ID exists. And then we'll paste that in there. Okay, any questions? Coolios. Let's move on to step 6. So we're going to reset hard and then git checkout. Workshop 7, step 6. We stopped at 1. Did we start at 1, right? Should we take a break right now? Maybe we should take a break after this step. I thought we started at 1. Okay. Oh, like this lecture, I see. Wait, I'll stop at the next step. Yeah. Okay, step 6. Live updating the active users. So, so hopefully, if your code is working, I should have done this before I checked out the next step. That was my bad, gang. But now when I open, not profile, I don't know why profile broke. I should be able to see all chat. Let us debug. Why can't I see all chat? I think I need to. Oof. All right, live debugging. Time. I call the get active users. I set active users. And then hopefully I'm displaying active users. But even if nothing is showing, all chat should still be showing. So let's see, chat list comprises of single chat components, and then our user consists of single users. Should show props.users.name. I don't know why my all chat has a name of all chat, so that should be displaying. Oh, wait. No, that is correct. If props.user ID exists. And then this is another way of concatenating it. Hello. Skippy. Do you know why it's not showing all chat on the right? I should have it in chat. In set active chat, I have set active users, all chat. And then it is hopefully calling the right. Not super sure. I think I checked out the start of the next step. Just double check complete is working. Oh, wait, all chat is showing. Am I just tripping? Wait, I don't know why it didn't show up. Wait. Oh, maybe I should check my server. Oh. It was working when I checked out complete, which makes sense. I thought this step you should be able to see all chat, right? I set active users. And I should be displaying it right now. Right now. Okay, wait. Let's just finish this step and then I can debug that later. Because I thought, yeah, I just checked out it. Okay, cool. So, don't know why the API request isn't working, but if the API request was working, I should be able to get all the active chats right now, and all chat should be there too. But unfortunately, when someone logs on, it won't auto-update, right? We get the same problem with messages. So what would be nice is whenever someone new connects to my server with a socket, the server will emit to everyone that someone new has connected. So I'll just emit active users again. So that's what step 6 is going to be. We're going to be let's see, in Chatbook. So whenever, yes, I think I'll do step 7 as well. Okay, sorry. So we're going to have socket.on, and we'll listen for the active users event. Whenever we hear the event, we will just update the state with whoever just joined. So it'll be very similar to the code you wrote here, but instead of adding the message, we'll be setting our active users. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to work on that while I debug the previous step. Sorry, as we were talking about the debugging process for what went wrong there, basically what happened is it takes a little bit of time for the so right before we had this if props.user, right? But then if you remember how we got the props.user, we have to call the /whereami endpoint. I think what was happening was that it was taking a while for that endpoint to get called. And so because our initial state for user ID is null, and so when we get here and we get a response, we get the response before our user ID gets loaded in. And so what our front end code goes is oh, you're not logged in, let me not display it. And so that was why it wasn't being displayed. But if I got rid of, if I got rid of these two, well, it'll always display, or it won't display anything if you're not logged in, but it will always get the data. But yeah, that's a quick, be careful of your API race conditions is the lesson, moral of the story. But anyways, I hope that didn't distract you too much from doing step 6.1. Did everybody get there? Feeling good? Okay, I will live code that one. So what we want to do is when we log on, or when we open Chatbook, we want to turn on our sockets. And this always happens in a use effect. So let me create a use effect on mount. And so we want socket.on this active users channel. And we basically want to run the same thingy that we did here, which is set active users. We need to concatenate all chat with that. And then, now don't forget to dismount. We'll copy and paste the same code here. And then we'll have socket.off. But wait, there's a problem. Does anybody know what the problem with doing this is? Yeah. Exactly. So what happens here is your event is technically this should be a callback function because it takes some input and then it this will be but what happens is whenever you define a function anonymously, it doesn't have a name, so you can define two functions that do the same thing that are not the same function, because every time we see a function declaration, basically what JavaScript does is oh, let me store this in memory in two different places. So what we need to do is we need to define a function, which we'll just call callback for now, and whatever data we get, we're going to do this with the data. Oh, I should have taken one more. So now I've given it a name, and so I can say when I turn off the function, so this is one of our actions, right? We listen to active users and we do callback. And because we've given the function a name, socket.off now knows which socket.on instance we care about. Does that make sense? Yeah. Probably. I'm not super sure. You definitely have to look at the socket.io documentation. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay. Okay, so now we have a working list, and hopefully, I can't demo this right now because I think, actually no, I think, Skippy, if you get on, wait, can you try getting on? Yeah, wait, can you get on Chatbook? I think because this is, oh, no, it's because it's running on different servers. It's on my local. New window? Yeah, one of my 4 alt accounts. Wait, but if I sign out of this one, I sign out of this one. Wait, what? Control-Shift-N? I think this just opens the... Oh, I'm in Firefox. It's okay, it doesn't matter. Because, wait, if I like open an incognito, then I have to log on to my Google account there to log on to Chatbook. But I remember when I was doing WebLab and I had 4 browsers open all on my 4 different email accounts just to test how my sockets were working. If you wanted to, you can do the same just to see that your sockets are working. But for now, you can just trust me that when someone else logs into your server, it should auto-populate. Okay, now we're going to take a break. And our break will be a push-up contest with Calvin, because Calvin walked in how much time late? 94 minutes and 38 seconds, and we shall make Calvin do 94 push-ups. I'm kidding. Does anybody else want to compete in a push? Huh? What? Does anybody want to compete with Calvin in a push-up contest? Sasha does. Anybody else? I will definitely lose in a push-up contest. And if anyone else wants to join in the push-up contest. Yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. I'm sorry, guys. I ate all my snacks from yesterday. If I had kept them, I would have given you a prize for participating. Excuses. Do you guys want to come to, wait, which side has more space? This side? Yeah, do you want to come to this side where there's more space? Sasha, we saw on Photo Roulette all those gym pics. We expect great things from you.
Wait, let me tie my hair up real quick. No!
Oh, Calvin's got to do 94.
Look at his muscles, bro. They're like bulging.
Okay, it's our break. Feel free to stand up and stretch. I know you guys have been sitting for a while.
I'll do 9.4.
Okay, get on the ground, contestants. I'll count them out for you. All right, get ready. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, Calvin's slowing down, 24, 25, 26, 27, Lucas can go on forever, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Oh, let's go, Luke. Wow, you beat Lucas.
You got pushed it yesterday.
Oh, what?
This guy pushed it yesterday.
I owe
and
you.
still beat me. I'm washed.
Oh, here you go. You're doing the next part. Yeah.
All right, hopefully you guys got to stretch, even if you didn't do push-ups. So let's continue and get back to the workshop. Thanks, Angeline, for cutting the first path. And let's actually visit where we are now and see what's happening on our local host. As you can see here, we have all these messages. We can see them. We can even send them. We can send them. we send them? We haven't done them yet. Well, we can see the all chat page I meant. And the issue is, one, as I just pointed out, you can't send messages yet. And two, you can't switch over to other DM recipients. So we're going to be implementing that in step 7 and 8, where you can switch to a new user to message. Step 7 is the front end side of things, and step 8 is the back end side of things. So let's get started with step 7 and be able to switch to a different tab. So in order to do this, we're going to be working in chatbook.jsx, and you're going to be updating the active chat state so that whenever the user switches tabs to a new user, we're actually also going to update the state for that. And you want to check that the new user we're switching over to is different from who we currently are on. And if it's different, then you want to update the new recipient and a message array and just initialize it as an empty array for now. And then that's the first part. You find that on line 79. And then for the second part, you're going to be modifying the use effect hook and change the load message history to whatever recipient we have currently, and as well as changing the dependency array so that the use effect hook executes every time the recipient changes. So give you guys 2 minutes to do this, and we'll come back together and I'll show you how to do it. Have you been coding on here? Yeah, basically. Okay.
I think we might end early.
I think so too.
Like, how much early? Don't you only, is this like a, I think there's 9 total steps.
There's 10.
10? Well, some of the steps are beefy. You can give people more time to work on those.
Yeah.
And then we can just end like as close to on time as possible. Probably?
True.
Yeah. I just give people more time to work on it. The Loki got like what, 40 minutes for the rest of it? How long did games run? Did it go over?
Went over, but well, you can ask Gavin the details.
Cause like I could give my part of the advanced CSS lecture.
Alright guys, let's come back together. I'll show you how to do step 7.1. So remember we're in chatbook.jsx, line 79 here. And remember what we do on this step is we're trying to update the active chat state. So let's just comment what we have here, where we're just console logging it. And first, we want to check that this new user we're receiving is different from our current active chat recipient. So let's just have a check and compare their IDs. Wow, Windows is hard.
What do you mean Windows is hard? It's just because of keyboard layout. Why does everybody say my keyboard layout is hard to type with? I don't get it. Do you think so?
Okay, so with this we're checking that the input user is different from our current user. And if they are different, then let's go ahead and update it to reflect this new user. So we're going to call our setter function for the active chat state. We're going to pass in a new active chat object. And let me see if I can pull it on this side here. Oops. All right, guess not. Okay, well, just remember that the active chat object takes in up here. It takes in a recipient, which is a user object that looks like this. And the second field is a messages object. So let's go ahead and update that. So the new recipient here, recipient is the user object that we're receiving as part of this function. And we're just going to initialize the messages as an empty array. So that's all we're doing for 7.1 in set active user here. And then for the next part, where we're loading the message history, that's up here, we're going to be in this use effect hook. Currently what's happening is that we're always loading the message history for all chat, but we have the active chat state for a reason to know who we're talking with. So let's go ahead and replace this so that instead we load the message history of whoever we have selected. To do that, let's just pass in active chat dot, oh my gosh, recipient. And we want this use effect hook to update every time we change recipients. So in order to do that, we're going to change our dependency array and add in active chat dot recipient. And interestingly, we're going to pass in the ID instead of just the recipient object here. And that's because what JavaScript does is that it does a shallow comparison. So it only compares the reference and not the actual values. Let's say that our new active chat recipient has the exact same values, but it's a different object. JavaScript won't know this, so it'll still execute this even when we don't want it to. All right, so that's step 7. And then if we actually check out the fruits of our labor, how do you left click? I see. All right. I think we're still having, okay. So now you have these 2 tabs, and after step 7, you should be able to switch between those 2 tabs. Yay. All right. Let's move on to step 8 and actually implement the back end side of things. Notice how even though I was switching between these 2 users, it's sending in the same message history. And we're going to be amending this in step 8 with the back end API stuff. So you're going to be in api.js, line 83, updating the chat endpoint. And currently, what it's doing is that it's querying for all messages where the recipient is all chat. And that's fine if our selected user is all chat, but we also want to be able to chat to other users. So if the request parameters suggest that we want to talk with someone else, then you should update the query to reflect this. So yeah, part 1, retrieve messages with all chat if our recipient is all chat. Otherwise, retrieve it to whatever user we specified. And I think there's a new syntax in here. If I switch over to step 8. And go over to api.js. Yeah, so see here we have an OR selector, and this is part of our MongoDB query. And what this basically means is that MongoDB is going to fetch every message object that satisfies at least one of these expressions that you define. So it's not exclusive. It doesn't have to satisfy only one. It's just any message that satisfies at least one of these expressions that we define. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do this, and again, we'll come back together at the end. going to move on, but does anyone want maybe 30 more seconds to do this step? Okay, so I'm going to move on and show you how to do step 8. So remember in the API.js file, we're in the chat endpoint here. And all we're doing is updating this query, because right now what we're doing is we're only finding messages where the recipient is all chat. And we want to be able to retrieve messages if the recipient is an actual user. So let's just go ahead and comment this out. So first, let's check if our recipient is in fact all chat. So the way we can do this is, let me pull up the front end side of things to remember how this looks like. So this is where we actually call the get HTTP request, and we see that the queries that or parameters we're receiving here is an object with a recipient ID field. So if rec.query.recipient underscore ID is in fact equal to all chat, then we can go ahead and structure our query as we had it. It's important to define a query variable too, guys. But otherwise, let's go ahead and retrieve messages if it's an actual user. Syntax hard. All right. So let's go ahead and use the OR selector that I talked about in this hint over here. Remember, all it does is that it finds any MongoDB document that satisfies at least one of the expressions or conditions we pass into it. So let's go ahead and define those conditions. Remember, when you're retrieving messages, flow of communication goes two ways. So one way is if you're the sender of the message and the other person is the recipient, and then the opposite where you're the recipient of the message and the other person you're chatting with sent the message. So we're going to go ahead and pass in these two conditions as the expressions. So let's say you're the sender, other person is recipient, and then vice versa, the other person is the sender, and you're the recipient. All right, so first condition, what that's going to look like if you're the sender, is going to be sender._ID. Remember, that's how we structured our message schema, as these fields. So let's check if you're the sender. Remember, that information is stored in rec.user. And the recipient is whoever we are chatting with. And that's stored in rec.query.recipient. And then look for the ID. So this is the case again. You're the sender, the other person's the recipient of the message. Now let's write the condition where the opposite is true. And you are the recipient of this message. Awesome. So this is all for step 8, and if I did it correctly, we can see this in our local host. So let's try and refresh here. All right. So if we switch back and forth, well, first, we should be seeing messages in all chat. Let's go back to VS Code. Oops. Web.query. So it's not retrieving the messages for all chat. server errored when get all chat. True. I structured. I wrote it wrong. Well, this is what the object looks like. Yeah, I got confused. Okay. All right, let's try this again, guys. Yay. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Just a little syntax issue. But anyways, as you can see, we have the message history for all chat. And if we try switching over to a new tab, it's going to be a different message history, which matches what we should have. Because the issue originally was, no matter which user we switched to, it was displaying the same message history for all of them. All right. So that was step 8. Let's move on to step 9. So in this step, we're going to be implementing DMs. The way we currently have things is that the socket is emitting messages to all users, and if we want to have a DM, this is very bad because we only want the specified specific person to receive that message and not everyone. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing in step 9, and we're going to be changing how we emit messages in the backend, because right now it calls get.io. Actually, I can just show you guys. Line 115. Whoops. Yeah, it calls get.io, which gathers all sockets, and it's emitting the message to everyone. But if it's a DM, we only want to get a specific socket. So yeah, that's what you guys are doing in step 9. I'll give you 2 minutes to do this. All you're doing is checking who the recipient is and ensuring that you're emitting to the proper socket. And make sure to read these hints. Pretty important. All right, does anyone want more time for step 9? Give me a thumbs up if you need like 30 more seconds. All right, give you guys a couple more seconds to work on this. come back together. I'll show you guys how to do step 9. So the way we currently have things is we're making this new message object in this post endpoint, and we're saving it to the database. And after we save it to the database, we're sending it out to the clients so they can then receive that message object and then display it on their end. But because we're calling get.io, it's sending this message to all the connected sockets, which we don't want for DMs. So let's go ahead and fix that. And first, I'm just going to take this out and check if we are talking in all chat. So we have a condition checking for that. And this is now stored in rec.body.recipient. And we're going to be checking if the active chat user is all chat, in which case we can go ahead and just do what we had originally and send that out to everyone. But in the case where we're talking to an actual user and it's a DM with just one person involved, then we're going to be in this else block. So first, let's check, because you can message yourself, and we don't want to send and emit messages twice. Let's just have a check preventing that. So we can check if our recipient is the same person as us. The way we'll do that is this. Our own information is stored in rec.user. So this is just checking that our new desired recipient isn't just us, because we don't want to emit the message twice. Right. So now the key thing here, the key function is, instead of calling get.io, we're going to call getSocket from user ID. And what this does is it finds a specific ID pertaining to whatever user we specified here, and the ID we're passing in is just going to be the recipient. So this just gets the socket of whoever we're chatting with, and then we can emit the message to just them. Awesome. So that'll send the message object to them, and they can display on their end. But remember, communication is two ways, and we also want to see this new message on our screen. So let's go ahead and emit to our socket as well. So I'll just copy this to make it quick. And instead of sending it to the recipient again, let's send it to the user. Cool. And that's what we're doing for step 9. And with this logic, instead of sending our message to everyone, we can now check if it's supposed to be sent to everyone. And otherwise, if it's a DM, we send that message only to the relevant sockets. All right. So let me pause on the solution here for any questions. Okay, great. Let me pause on it so I can also make sure I coded it right. Yeah, this looks good to me. We're going to check out anyways. All right, go ahead and check out to step 10. I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that while I do it too. All right, this is our last step, guys. We skipped the step. All right. So for this step, this is more for optimization. The way that things currently work is that we're updating the messages for a chat history, even if that person's not the one we're talking to. So we kind of don't need that because you're not even looking at those messages. Why update them? So in this step, we're going to modify the front end to only modify the state and receive new messages if those messages are with whoever we're actually talking to. So it's just like you're just adding a condition, an if statement, and as a hint, you're checking 3 conditions, which is 1, if you're the sender and the other person is the recipient and who we're chatting with in active chat. 2 is the opposite of that. And 3rd, if the recipient is all chat. Okay, that's low-key confusing. Let me rephrase that. So this add message function, it takes in a data object, and that data object follows the message schema. So it's going to have a sender, recipient, and timestamp. So you're going to be checking if either the sender is, you're going to be checking if the sender is active chat and you're the recipient. That's one condition. The other condition is if you're the sender and active chat is the recipient. That's the second condition. The third condition is if you're the sender and all chat is the recipient. In which case you run add message as normal. All right, I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do that. Sorry if the instructions are unclear, but again, we'll clarify things at the end. All right, I gave you guys 3 minutes there instead of the 2 I said originally. So for step 10, we're in chatbook.jsx, line 35. Remember what we're doing is that this function, add message, is receiving a message object. That's what data is. And I have on the side what that object will look like as these 3 fields. And we want to check if this message object is actually relevant to us and something that should be updated based off of who our active chat is currently talking to. So if this incoming message, if either the sender or the recipient is active chat, then we want to call this logic right here. So let me just move this inside an if statement block. And again, what are the conditions we are defining for when this should actually run? Remember, I said there are 3. Oopsie daisies. Okay, it's kind of like loss. Right, the first condition is if, let's say, the sender is active chat and we're the recipient. So let's check for that. So we're going to check this data, this message object, and see who it's, actually I forgot what example I said. We're going to see who the sender is and check if it's the active chat, so whoever we're currently talking to. And on the other end, if we're the recipients of this message. Equals. And then we can find our user information as it's part of the props in our hint over there. So props.user ID. And this is the first condition. So if this incoming message was sent by whoever we're talking to and we're receiving it. And then the second condition will be the opposite of that. So we're sending the message to whoever we're talking to. So I'll write this out as such. Is us. And active chat is the recipient of this incoming message. Alright, and then the third condition is if the message is getting sent to all chat. So that's going to look like us being the sender. And the recipients of this message being all chat. Perfect. Alright, so these are the three conditions for when we should run this add message function. And remember, this is just to optimize things. We don't care about messages that are for a message history we don't even have open. These are the three cases where we'll actually have this active user displayed and we want that incoming message to display. Oh my goodness, thank you. We can blame that on Angeline's window laptop. Alright, thank you, Luke. So that concludes step 10. If you guys were confused about the steps we did today, make sure to post on Piazza and come to office hours. And you can actually play around if you were lost by just checking out to W7 Complete and play around with the website we are coding today. So yeah, again, all the documentation for sockets are found at this link, socket-guide and socket-docs. But as a recap, let's go over what we learned today. So on the server side of things, for sockets, you can either shout your message and data to all clients, all users, or if you just want to target a specific socket, a specific client, you can use get socket from user ID and have information from that. Then on your client side, to actually receive information and to process that data, you're going to use the on function. And what that takes in is a callback function, and it passes in that piece of data as input to process it however you define. So again, this is an example of what the code looks like. This is what you're going to see on the server side. It's going to take in a first argument, which is whatever event you arbitrarily name, and then a callback function that takes in the data from the server. And you can do whatever you want. You can respond immediately to this new information. That's that live interaction idea. And on the server side, this is how you would actually send that data over. You have two ways of doing it. Both use emit. But the first one is to get everyone's socket, get IO. And the second one is to target a specific user if you know their ID. And yeah, you're just sending in this piece of data along the same channel you define. All right, so that's it for this workshop. Make sure to fill out the feedback form so we know what to improve on if you guys were lost ever. We do listen and we do pay attention and we do try and implement your feedback. All right, should we do a recap on announcements?
Also, remember to turn off your sockets when you dismount your components.
Oops. I can't see what I'm typing.
Oh. Tuesday. Let me try to remember. Please RSVP for sponsors lecture at weblab.is/RSVP. Thank you. That makes you eligible for the raffle. We have 3 sponsor lectures, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, at those listed times. If you notice, I was going to say they decrease by 30 minutes every time, but they don't. Office hours today. Please come, especially if you need to get your milestone 1 done. Get that checked off. MVP is due next Wednesday. Come to office hours if you need help working on your MVP, don't know how to start, etc., etc. We'd be happy to help. That's it. That's it. All right, y'all are free to go out 2 minutes early.